Good afternoon. For those who are not part of our Ladies Thursday group, I'll introduce myself. My name is Suzanne, Dr. Suzanne Thompson. I have a doctorate in theology, and we meet each Thursday here in Southport, and we have a Bible study and some fellowship, some worship and communion. Today we were finalising actually, the study we did on the resurrection of the Messiah. And I thought for those who might have missed it, it would be a good idea to record this last session. I'll give you a brief overview. It is based on a Bible study by A.Fruchtenbaum of Ariel, where I'm currently doing an associate degree. And he outlines, and we did it at length previously, the resurrection of the Messiah. We talked about the history of the resurrection and the dawning of Resurrection Day, the opening of the tomb, the arrival of the women and the reports, and then the various appearances to his followers, the disciples. Then to the 11, then to the 7, and then to the 500, and then to the various apostles, and we went through each one biblically. The next section was the theological impact, the implications, results, and significances of the resurrection. We talked about typology in the Old Testament, and we mentioned two types of typology. And I have to say that this was really, it's all very interesting of A.Fruchtenbaum's work, but this was very interesting. They talked about that in the Old Testament, there were predictions of Jesus's resurrection, and they mention in particular that of Melchizedek. So we looked at Genesis 14, verses 18 and 20, and we saw that that Melchizedek suddenly appeared in history and then just as suddenly disappeared. There's no resurrection history, there's no genealogy, there's no birth or early life, and no record of his death. So as far as recorded history is concerned, he lives forever. And although that sounds like a very strong statement, we did go on to see that in Hebrews 7, this actually is the fact. So in Genesis 14, 18 to 20, it speaks of who he was. He was the king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham as he was returning from slaughter of the kings and blessed him. You must read it because it states in there that he was made like the Son of God. He remains a priest perpetually. Read the scriptures, please do, because in verse 12 it states that when the priesthood is changed, there has to be a change of law too. Now we know that Jesus descends from the tribe of Judah, and there's no priestly mention. A change of priestly lineage necessitated a change of law, and it was no longer the law of Moses. There needed to be a better covenant, a permanent priesthood, as it says in verse 24. So, in order to be able to save the lost forever, because he always makes intercession for them, the law appoints high priests who are weak, but the word of the oath in verse 21 appoints a son made perfect forever. So you see, as in the Old Testament, it was the law of Moses, Jesus was under the new covenant. the Davidic covenant, as we saw in our lesson on dispensations and covenants. And so the law had to change. It had to change from the Mosaic law then to the law of the New Testament, the New Covenant. So he was a type of Jesus, a type of resurrection. The second one that's mentioned are the two birds in Leviticus 14, verses 4 to 7, where one bird is slain, the other bird is covered by the blood. Read it in Leviticus 14, verses 4 to 7. The third type of typology is concerning the Feast of First Fruits. So if we look in Leviticus 23, verses 9 to 14, we see that it speaks about the first fruits. And then, according to Paul, in 1 Corinthians 15, verses 20 to 24, the Feast of First Fruits was fulfilled by the resurrection of Messiah. So these are three typology types in the Old Testament and then in the New. Then we talked about prophecy, and we saw that there's a clear-cut predictions concerning the resurrection, and these are found in 4 passages we went through. The first one is Psalm 16, verses 9 to 10. Therefore my heart is glad, and my glory rejoices. My flesh also shall dwell in safety, for you will not leave my soul to Sheol, neither will you suffer your Holy One to see corruption. So, twice in the New Testament, this Psalm 16, verses 9 to 10, is declared as having been fulfilled by the resurrection. In Acts 2, 24 to 31, and Acts 13, 32 to 37. I'm sorry that we don't have time. I want to make this as brief as possible, but the scriptures need to be looked at to make it a real Bible study. I'm sorry, I do realise this. The second prophecy of the resurrection is Psalm 22, 22 to 31. And this is the prophecy of the death of Messiah. But in verses 22 to 31, the same one who died in verses 1 to 21 is very much alive. So this prophesies the resurrection. A third passage is in Psalm 118, verse 22. And that is shown as to be the resurrection in Acts 4, verses 10 to 11. The fourth prophecy is Isaiah 53, verses 10 to 12. So those are some of the prophecies of the resurrection in the Old Testament, which are shown in the New Testament. The next section is the fact of the resurrection. Now, that the Bible teaches that there is a resurrection from the dead can be seen in 3 ways. First, the Messiah predicted it. And this is in Matthew 16, 21, Mark 9, 31, Luke 18, 33, and John 10, 17 to 18. Secondly, an important thing to note is that the resurrection is emphasized in that none of the Gospels ended at the crucifixion. All 4 of the synoptic Gospels talk of the resurrection. They all ended with a resurrection. A third is the historical book of Acts, and there it's just full of quotations. It's also in the epistles, in Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, Thessalonians, Timothy and Peter. They all speak of a resurrection. Now, there have been many theories of resurrection, and conspiracy theories says a conspiracy to lie, saying that the most common explanation is the whole thing is everything's a lie. It's a fabrication. the apostles lied. It was a conspiracy to deceive the public. This is the first of the theories. But why, if it was all a conspiracy, did the Jewish writers give prominence to women who witnessed the resurrection, knowing very well that the testimony of a woman was not acceptable in court in the Jewish community? If this were a fabrication, a lie, they would have had men initially to have to be the first one to see the resurrected Messiah. Secondly, why would they, all the disciples, suffer martyrs' deaths if they knew it was all a lie? It doesn't make sense, does it? So then the second one is the stolen body theory, the fraud theory. This is probably the oldest one. Oh, somebody stole the body. But the same again. Why would the disciples be willing to suffer a martyr's death if there was no body, no resurrection? And in any case, the presence of the Roman guard would have made it impossible to steal the body. So the next one is the swoon theory, where it says that Jesus fainted on the cross, appeared to be dead, and then came to again when he was in the tomb. But this, first of all, the guard pierced him and blood and water came out of Jesus's body. Then to faint on the cross would automatically mean death, because if you faint, your body would sag and you would die of asphyxiation. They wouldn't be able to breathe. So, suffocation rather. So, that theory requires a lot of faith, and people are asked to believe that after 3 days without food and water, without medical attention, after being scourged and crucified, don't forget that the scourging was done with metal thongs which tore the flesh off his body. In Isaiah it says that he was unrecognisable, his body, because it was so terribly disfigured. He would have been flayed alive, literally. So how would he be able to roll away the stone and terrify the Roman guards and escape? It just doesn't stand on its own. The other one is the wrong tomb theory. We advise that it was Joseph of Arimathea who offered his family tomb, and this was used, and it was marked by a seal, a Roman seal. Jesus wasn't buried in a public cemetery where there were lots and lots of other tombs. It was this family tomb. So the wrong tomb, it doesn't stand on its own. The spirit theory, that's another thing, that only the spirit return, not the body. However, all four Gospels teach that it is a physical, bodily resurrection. The sixth theory is a hallucination theory, claiming that the disciples hallucinated. Excuse me.